last year. What actually propelled the institution to collect those taxes that we are seeing following the release of the numbers for last year? And Reverend, thank you so much for welcoming us to your office. And let me first ask you, for you, what do you make of the numbers?
I think it's a significant improvement on the last year's 2020's numbers. I think that when the target was set for 57 billion, many doubted whether it can be achieved. And I remember when we had our press, the time of the press, there were a lot of questions on that front. And therefore, for us as staff, we were all determined that we need to make sure that these numbers are achieved. And there were a number of initiatives and a lot of strategies, and that helped us to come this far. So generally, the numbers are quite significant improvement. And even when you look at the various ratios that come out of it, we will say that it's also quite good.
What were some of those critical things that helped you, especially in the pandemic year where we all thought that, okay, well, everybody is not doing well, coupled with restrictions and all those things, making sure the staff that goes out there to check all those things are correct, compliant, and all those challenges, you managed to still collect as taxes.
Yeah, I think we realized where we stood and the challenges that are around. And if I would just chip in, normally, if you have read Who Moved My Cheese, when your cheese is moved, you try to find out where can you get other cheese. Those who have read that book. So basically what we're trying to do is to look at various avenues, and we put a number of strategies that will ensure that we will achieve the target. I mean, if you recall, some of them, number one, the Ghana card was one issue. Though I will not say that much money has come through the first year yet, but at least it created an awareness, and many people started trying to make sure that they can come in and file their taxes, especially when you made a lot of noise about the professionals. Number two, we talked about the waiver of interests and penalties. And that one, for example, by the time we ended the year, more than 2,100 taxpayers had applied for the waiver of interest and penalty, even at the domestic side only. And the total of about 2.2 billion of debts, out of which about 1.1 billion was paid before the end of December, and another interest of about 400 and penalties of about 600 were waived. So again, these debts has existed for a couple of years, and people took advantage because we saw the pandemic situation, and then put in that policy to say that if you can come in and we give you a spread over 6 months to pay your tax, and you can pay the principal, we're ready to waive the interest and penalties. And many people took advantage of it.
How did digitization also contribute? You have the online payment, so even though it was quite difficult to let these persons go into these companies, do the double checking, there was an online platform where businesses could still pay their taxes. How did that also contribute to the numbers that we saw for end of year 2021?
It contributed significantly because there are two key things that happened last year. One, in terms of being able to file online, and many people filed. And then two, being able to pay online. And for the first time in GRA, we were able to take off all payments out of our offices. And that created, created room in the offices such that people don't go there to queue. You just go there to transact your tax business. Number two, it removed the issue about dishonored checks and the issue about sometimes money flowing from the authority even to the bank accounts. So we didn't have any dishonored checks because people will only pay when they have the money and they just have to clear. Previously, we had got a lot of checks that come in and they don't get honored. So that also, and then for when people have convenience, you know, paying tax is not easy, as I always say. But if it's convenient for you to pay, then at least you take advantage as well. So one, it blocked some of the leakages, which was like the example of the leak. And then two, it made it convenient for people. So it also helped a lot. And then also digitalization on the port side. When we introduced the ICAMs, I think we introduced, as we saw in 2020, we saw the increases beginning in 2020. And it continued significantly over the year. And that led to customs division doing over 27% year-on-year increase and going over 16 billion. So that aside, that aspect also helped a lot. So digitalization actually really helped. And Ghana.gov coming through, because again, now when we do, the collections are done by the banks within 48 hours. Automatically the money moves to the central bank. Previously, they have to do a manual transfer, and there were also issues about reconciling what have been transferred and what have not been transferred. That was for working with 2 banks. Today we work with 22 banks, and we don't have those reconciliation. And you can imagine if with 2 banks we had reconciliation challenges, if not because of automation, digitalization, we would have never. But when we talked about wanted to introduce all the banks to the question people ask me, you are struggling with reconciliation with 2 banks. How will you manage 22 banks?
Yeah.
And digitalization did it. So I think that is also a very significant part of it.
Let's look at, not getting into specific numbers or ratios, let's look at the various tax types as well, domestic, customs as well. Was it all rosy in all these tax types, or there were some challenges in some areas that has come up to your attention?
There were challenges in some areas that have come to our attention, and many areas did very well. PAYE, for example, improved significantly. I think that as we were coming out of the pandemic, when I say coming out, not that it has ended, but people found ways of managing it, and therefore more people were in employment. And again, some of our the work on PAYE in terms of making sure that more people pay the PAYE. So we saw PAYE increasing. We saw corporate income tax, and I'm looking at domestic, corporate income tax also increasing. Some of the sectors, like the financial sector, did quite well. Some of the mining areas also did well. But some of the areas that we still saw we had challenges is with personal income tax, for example. We know personal income tax, the vehicle income tax are also treated as personal income tax. And with the suspension of the vehicle income tax in 2021 budget, it meant that those incomes, so that saw a shortfall from the previous year to the current year. So this year we need to find out ways of being able to bring in some more people into the personal income tax bracket. Another area that we also saw some declines include the mineral royalties, and we are trying to also understand some of the dynamics there and also be able to see where the shortfalls are. And then I also want to say that in the extractive sector, because we focus a bit more on compliance, we're able to get some payments coming through, and it's something that we continue to do in the year that we have entered to make sure that we'll be able to get some more revenues from that area. So to answer your question, yes, some tax types did well. Other tax types did not do all that well, and we have analyzed it, and we are trying to find ways of improving them.
With respect to communication service tax, and I stand to be corrected, was it more of the revision in the rate, or it has to do with the fact that you struggled in collecting taxes in that area?
I think it's more of the revision of the rates.
Okay.
Yes, because the communication service tax, the CST, because of the automation as well as the work that is being done by the common platform for monitoring, I think that as far as going forward is concerned, since they started the monitoring, we don't have many challenges in the collection. And it is the revision of the rates that actually, and people were expecting that with the revision of the rates and with the increased usage in terms of data and other things by many people for online meetings, maybe we'll have made more money than the previous year. But I don't think that increase was sufficient to make money. And I think that the government did it for a good purpose, because we all knew that that was a time that people were relying on data, and therefore it wasn't necessary for them to be able to use the data effectively at less cost.
A target of 57 billion was set in a year where, unlike compared to previous years, it has been reviewed and all the rest. If you look at the tax GDP ratio, we're still doing 13% compared to, some would say, our peers. What would you tell those who might argue that sometimes these targets are still low, and therefore, quote, we shouldn't be excited when GRA is able to collect these taxes? Looking at the size of our economy, we should be collecting more than what we've collected.
I think we don't deny the fact that as a nation, we need to improve upon our tax collection. And therefore, we believe that there are many strategies that we have to put in place that will ensure that our revenue increases significantly. And that is one of the reasons why we saw that this year's revenue collection in terms of year-on-year increase is the most highest year-on-year increase in the last 10 years of 26.3%. And then you also saw that as you have said, the tax to GDP ratio, which was about 12.59% last year, now increased to 13.4%. And in the next year's budget, that is 2022, we have budgeted to increase it further to 16.5%. And so if you look at the structure of our tax system now, there is room to change the structure and to change the methods and to ensure that we bring more people into the tax net and therefore be able to move towards the 18-20%, which is what So to conclude on trying to answer your question, I won't say that the targets as they are set now is low. The targets are quite significantly high, but if we are able to work on the various methods and the various issues of ensuring compliance, then we should be able to move our tax to GDP ratio very high.
But you don't. What do you say to the critics or the skeptics who are saying that GRA has met its targets over the years because the targets were low?
I think that you will notice that even over the years, in the last 5 years, this is the first year that the target has not been revised at the mid-year review. For every year, the target has been revised downwards. And it tells you that the target is not that low. If it is that low, then it would have been very easy to meet the targets. But you see consistently that as the struggles come in the middle of the year, the tax is revised downwards, and then we do achieve the targets. But for 2021, the target that was set in 2020 at the beginning of the year, when the budget was read, was not revised downwards, and it's this target that we met. So the targets are not low at all. They are quite high in the midst of the situation, the environment. But I want to emphasize that there is opportunity when we look at the various structures that are in place and the various methods. I'll give you an example. If you look at our current laws, we talk about people going for, let's say, a bank account or even for passport and things like that, and we say you should produce your TIN. Can you imagine? And then today, if you look at the law says that if somebody wants a tax grant certificate, he must request for a tax grant certificate. Why should somebody request for a tax grant certificate before he's giving one? It should be made automatic that if I'm compliant, I should have a tax grant certificate. So these are some of the things that we are looking at. And if it's like that, and also for many of the services that the central bank, not the central bank, the central government provides to the citizens, if a tax grant certificate is made a requirement, you will see many people ensuring that they are tax compliant. And for us in GRA, we also have to make sure that tax grant certificate is easy to access by automating it and making sure that if George wants his tax grant certificate, he should be able to put in his TIN into a platform online and be able to access his tax grant certificate. And if he's not compliant, he should be able to see that he's not compliant. Those are the things that we are working on this year. And we are very hopeful that it will get to a point where the individuals rather chase to be compliant.
Looking at the numbers and how you have fared in a challenging year, digitization, compliance, bringing the banks on board and all those things, for you, what has been the eye-opener or the opportunity that you've seen, just like they say threats, opportunities and all the rest, that you think that, listen, going forward, we are going to watch this space because that is something we didn't look at. And if we just explore that space a little bit, we may be addressing about 50% of our mobilization challenges.
I think I'll go for the Vice President always says that digitalization is a real opportunity for us.
From what you've seen and what you collected,
Exactly.
it was a big opportunity in terms of what you brought in.
Yes, and therefore we need to look more. One of the things that have eluded us for some time, which definitely this year we have to implement, is the area of digitalizing our VAT collection. And you know that has been something that has been on the drawing board for some time. And for this year, we are very, very confident that we will be able to put it, roll it out. Again, if you take the e-commerce sector, because we are not digitalizing, e-commerce is digital. And therefore, if you are not also digitalizing, collecting it, then you are missing out of it. Now, again, if you talk about gaming has completely moved from manual to digital, right down from football to all sort of game, betting that you see. And therefore, if you also don't move in that direction, then you are left out. So I think that we see a lot of opportunities there, and we want to capitalize on those opportunities and make sure that we be able to collect these taxes. And this gives us the assurance and the confidence that even though the targets that have been put for 2022 is quite high, we are confident that we
and that was what I was coming up from 50 to 100. Some are saying that's that's a real target for GRA, and
it's hoping that from 57 to 80.
Okay, sorry. Hoping that the economy expands as expected. That could be a huge challenge. What are you going to do differently to ensure that that target is achieved?
There are a number of initiatives that we have in place that we are rolling out. I have talked about the Ghana Card Initiative. And the Ghana Card Initiative, we have come out with a strategy. And the strategy is in 4 steps that will do lead generation. When I say lead generation because we have identified over 9 million potential taxpayers who are not compliant at this moment. Then the second thing that we are doing is that we are going after these 9 million potential taxpayers, and then we are going to move sure the third step is to ensure we assess these 9 million taxpayers, and then the fourth step is to collect the taxes for these 9 million taxpayers. And this is something that we have planned over the next 2 years, and therefore we expect that this year we'll get significant coming through. That's number 1. Number 2, we also talked about the digitalization, so the VAT and the other electronic means, like in terms of the e-commerce, will also come on board, and we expect that one to also help us significantly. And then I also mentioned a couple of times the issue about the natural resources, the extractive sector. There are a lot more we have to do as far as the capacity of our people are concerned to be able to match with the capacity of these multinationals and be able to ensure that the right taxes are paid from these multinationals. And that's an area that we ensure a lot of compliance will bring in a lot of revenue. And don't forget also that we've talked about the e-levy. I know there's a lot of debate going on, but I think that sometimes there are some misconceptions, and as you continue to educate and you continue to explain, that's also another area that we expect that significant revenue also come from. So it's not just e-levy. There are a number of about 7 areas that we have identified that we know will bring in the revenues. And 40% year-on-year increase will be the highest, one of the highest ever, but we are confident that it is possible, it is doable.
How prepared is the Revenue Authority, all other things being equal, if Parliament gives the approval to go ahead and mobilize the required revenue for the state?
Yeah, the government had made it very clear to us as an authority that collecting of taxes is our job, and therefore the e-levy, when it's passed, in terms of how we collect it, it is our job. And therefore, as I speak, we have a steering committee in place, we have a technical committee in place, and we are looking at various ways of collecting it based upon the current structure of the bill. We know it will go through Parliament, and what will come out finally may be different from what it is now, but at least for what we have, we are using that one to be able to prepare the grounds ready for takeoff. And we are engaging with the various stakeholders. We are also applying the various logics that will have to come in terms of, for example, the first 100 cities that should be exempted. So we need to have make sure the kind of collection I have to do, have to put, take this logic into consideration, and also the various types of transfers that are excluded. For example, if you are paying through Ghana.gov or for a government revenue payment, is also exempted, and a number of such things. If you are paying from your own account to yourself, in other words, if you are transferring money from your Tigo account to your MTN account, you're not supposed to be charged. Absolutely. And so all these are things that the team is working on. And so we are getting ourselves ready. As soon as the law is passed, then we'll finalize the things and come out. Our target is 1st February.
Commissioner, some have said that in your quest to achieve your target and mobilize the required revenue for the state, GRA has been ruthless, not business friendly. And if you kill the chicken that lays the eggs, then who's there to collect give you the eggs to collect?
I would disagree with such
being ruthless. And
being ruthless. Because, for example, if you notice that the waiver of interest and penalties that we did in 2021 has been extended to this June 2022, and as I speak, we've already started publishing. Making this about it. And so, if you are not business friendly, how will we extend the waiver of interest and penalties? And as I mentioned in the earlier interview when we started, that overall more than 2,000 taxpayers applied for this waiver of interest. The total amount was over 2.4 billion, out of which about 1.1 billion of interest and penalties have already been waived. And so it means about half of what could have been collected has been waived, and another half has been paid. So that is one thing. And then two, we have also set up a focus on customer experience. And for a tax authority to come out with a focus on customer experience, where our aim is just like the way the banks do, to make sure that, or the telcos do, that people have. So there's a combination of making the customer happy, and we're treating our taxpayers as customers. But at the same time, we have to make sure compliance, and therefore we are balancing between compliance and customer experience, and also considering the environment. But where people become recalcitrant, at some point, the cane is important. So we are combining a carrot and stick
So you are not
approach.
being ruthless at all?
I wouldn't say we are being ruthless, even though I talk about things like prosecution. And again, if you go to some places, people know that if you don't pay the tax, you have to be prosecuted. And so, and then we'll make sure that it becomes convenient for the people to comply. So we are not being ruthless.
You recently put an ad in the papers about rent tax, and people's concern was that, why that? And also, is GRA veering into areas where it's supposed to be for the municipal and district assemblies?
I think that people, in fact, this year we plan to do a lot more education. People have not understood rent tax. Rent tax is not a new tax, and I want to emphasize. Rent tax has been in our statutes for a long time. Now, the compliance level has been low, and therefore we have come out with strategies to ensure compliance. And again, the digitalization, which allows us to now see on a map digitally all the properties that are being rented. And so we are now enforcing compliance. That's why we are sending people around. And so that is the rent tax aspect, and we are only trying to make sure that people understand it and pay. The other part, which is for the MDAs or the local authorities, is the property tax. So there are two different taxes that come as far as the property is concerned. You having the property, you pay property tax. You renting the property, you pay rent tax, which is like an income tax coming for the property that you are renting. Now, in the budget also, if you recall, the government did say that they want the GRA to play a more active role in helping the municipalities to collect their property tax as well. And so we are constantly, we are already in engagement and coming out with the strategies and the extent to which we'll do the help to the MDAs, to be at the Ministry of Local Government, to be able to collect the property tax. And so we'll be helping more significantly and more actively in collecting the property tax. But it's for the municipalities. If there will be some sort of ratio or sharing to ensure that GRA is, GRA, and for that matter, the central government is compensated in terms of helping to the local authorities to collect. But property rent tax still remains the purview or the mandate of Ghana Revenue Authority to collect, and we'll focus on both.
Let's look at the Ghana card and how significant will that play in your mobilization efforts going forward. Now that it's being made virtually compulsory now, you're going to have more numbers. And I know you've done your extrapolations and all those things. Going into next year, how critical will this Ghana card, being able to identify everyone out there, impact on collections?
Yeah, it is very, very significant, very important. The strategy is that for every one that registers for the Ghana card, which then comes into our database, we have to make sure that that person is compliant. And that is if he qualifies or he falls into the tax bracket, no matter how low or his income is, but we want to make sure that he's compliant. And therefore, our strategy too is to ensure that in our system, or everybody that has his data coming into the system, we are able to take that person to see whether he's compliant or not. And we'll give you, before the end of the year, the ability for any person to go into our system and check his compliance level. And therefore, if you are not compliant, it becomes you yourself, your duty to come to GRA to make sure that you find out why am I not compliant, and then you fulfill your obligations to become compliant. So what we are moving towards is not we chasing people, but the people chasing GRA to become compliant. That's our goal, and we are sure we get there. I'll give you an example. When they did the Ghana card and therefore move on to the registration of the SIM card. Yeah. Now is the people looking to register for the SIM card because they know that they need the SIM card to run their business. If we make sure that the tax compliance certificate is a requirement for many of the other things you do. For example, if you want to renew your driver's license, you require it. If you want to renew your roadworthy, you require it. If you want to renew your passport, you require it. Then you will come to make sure that you are compliant.
Commissioner, recently you advertised in the papers again about seeking for information of some directors of some companies who have evaded taxes. Is it that bad about more companies evading or more companies compliant, and where have you gotten to that status as well?
We are trying to make sure that we don't stop at any point. So there are compliance measures that we take. For example, we have the Debt Management and Compliance Department, and their duty is to ensure that they follow up on debts. Now, previously or in some time past, maybe you follow up on debt at some point and then you stop. But this time, I want to make sure that we explore all the avenues. So we'll follow up on you if we're able to get you. If you don't get you, that's the company. We'll look for your directors. If we don't get the directors and we can't find them, if we have to advertise, we will advertise. And then we also want to bring in the prosecution. We have tasked all the officers to make sure that people who are not compliant, and after all the efforts, they are still not compliant, we have to prosecute them, we will prosecute them. So basically, it's part of the compliance mechanism. And as I said earlier on, we will use all the avenues available to us to make sure that people become compliant.
So what's the status of the oil marketing companies who are indebted to GRA, and also those in the extractive sector, where I remember the last time I spoke to you, you said that even if it will mean holding on to their tax clearance before they get out of this market, you might do that?
I think that we have seen a significant improvement in the payments from the oil marketing sector as we focus more on them. For those who have not paid, as you might be aware, there are over 30 of them that we are prosecuting.
You're going to have to prosecute them?
Oh yes, we have started prosecuting them in the courts. And I'm sure if you speak to them, they will know. And since we started, some of them have come to negotiate and started paying. But those who will fail will continue the prosecution to its ultimate conclusion. And currently I know that there are about 30, and some of them have already appeared in the courts. And we think that this year we might have to even talk to the Chief Justice to add one more court, because we started with just one, and we see the volumes, the numbers, and so we will continue to pursue them. We have put various restrictions, and at the same time, if you talk about being friendly, we also try to see, let's say, for example, if you give you the chance to be able to pay over a period of time, and at the same time, we don't allow you to take on credit. When I say on credit, you pay upfront the tax before you take, so that you'll be in business. So you are not adding to the debts, but at least you are in business to be able to reduce the debts. But all this depends upon you satisfying a number of conditions that we will put across to the OMCs. And I think that we are seeing a significant improvement in compliance and payment. And we'll continue. There are a number of options that we are looking at as far as increasing the compliance. And if necessary, we'll put up any of those options that we think that will ensure that they pay.
What about the extractive, both extractive gold and then oil as well?
One of the challenges that we've had in the extractive sector is the number of disputes, and that has been pending for some time. And therefore, because you have done an audit of, let's say, for example, up to say 2018, and you have not been able to resolve the disputes, then it becomes difficult for you to do the subsequent audits. We are engaging them very seriously, and we are committed to ensuring that these things are resolved as quickly as possible. In fact, and we are confident that whatever it will take for us to resolve them so that we can do the other audits and then get the monies coming through. One of the things that I know the Ministry of Finance is committed to ensuring is the issue about the appeals, Revenue Appeals Board. Remember, it was passed.
Is it in place now?
It's not in place, and that's what I said. The Ministry of Finance is committed to ensuring that this year it will put it in place. The advantage of that is that when a taxpayer disagrees with the decision of the Commissioner General, then instead of going to the courts, he has the option of going to the appeals tribunal and get a quicker. And therefore, that's also another thing that the government is working on, so that the issue about disputed taxes will be resolved quickly. And once it's resolved quickly, then we don't have things hanging for too long. So that's one of the strategies to ensure compliance.
Your final words to businesses out there who are worried that a higher target means a very aggressive GRA, and they are worried that in their engagement with GRA. I mean, your final words to businesses and taxpayers out there.
Yeah, I think that if we achieved the 57, we did 57.3 billion, it is them who paid us the revenues. And therefore, I want to say thank you to our tax payers, whether individual, small, direct or indirect, for their contribution. And we want to encourage that there are still more opportunities, more revenues out there that they can still pay.
Informal sector.
Yes, to be able to help our development as a nation. Therefore, I want to encourage them that we want to put as much as possible avenues for voluntary compliance. And we also continue to be as friendly as possible. And then we also want to put in convenience. So we will develop more avenues for digitalization. And then we'll also be publishing an avenue for people who feel that they are being cheated or they are not being treated well, to get an avenue to complain, and we'll get a response. Because sometimes also another area that people get worried with, about. So that's also a thing that we put in place. So we will be aggressive, but at the same time we'll be friendly, and we'll also make convenience available to taxpayers. So at the end of the day, we all, as a nation, will contribute our quota, and as individuals, so that we'll be able to achieve the target that we have set for ourselves. When we say target that we have set for ourselves, it's money that comes for us to develop our nation and to put the roads there, to put the schools there, to pay for those who are in the schools. And let's all contribute.
Reverend Doc, I thank you so much for your time, and have a very great day, sir.
Thank you very much.